We did it. We beat ESPN. The returning production database is available at campus2can.com. Now, I'm going to talk to the man that did all the work right after the stinger. It's Felix Sharp and Nicholas Ian Allen for campus2can.com. I hope you like the video. I hope you subscribe to the channel, like the video so we can grow. Nicholas Ian Allen, I think one of the best benchmarks, I don't know the word I'm looking for here as a company, was bringing you on last year. The returning production database is now available for 134 FBS teams. Nick, for those who are uninitiated or who may be checking your content out or our content out for the first time, what is returning production and what can the people expect to find at the website?
Well, returning production simply is who's coming back, who's not from last year's teams. And it's changed a little bit over the years. And you mentioned that, yeah, we beat ESPN. That was a big deal, a big goal of mine, has been for a few years. And this is the first time we've been able to do it. But Bill Connolly, who oversees it there, has done a lot of great work and is really sort of the godfather of this as a concept to put a number on who's coming back, who's not, what stats matter to tell you, who are the most experienced teams and things like that. But it's changed a little bit now with, of course, as we all know, the just massive number of transfers that has gone up and up and up over the last several years. We have to figure out a way to account for those players. And sometimes, even though it's not necessarily, continuity on your specific roster, the fact that you're bringing in players who've been, productive, have a lot of experience, that has value as well. So Bill, of course, has done some great research and definitely taken, some insight from him, but also done a few things our own way and are able to really put a number on what are the most experienced teams coming back, what are the teams who bring back the most in terms of offensive, defensive, overall, production stats, basically yards, snaps, all that good stuff, and kind of filtering out what's the important part and what means the most and how will that carry over to the next college football season.
Let me just summarize there, Nick. So you can find at the website at campus2can.com statistically how much by percentage and individually identified player that a school is returning. That includes raw returning production. So, the players that were on the roster in 2023 coming back in 2024 and adjusted returning production, the transfers in to that program. By the way, Nicholas Ian Allen, for an added measure, adds the head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator moves. You can get all of that information at campus2can.com. Just become a C2C Winning Edge member, and you will get the information. The top 10, here are the names. I'll do this in descending order. At number 10, USF, Syracuse, Rice, Texas A&M at 7. Texas A&M, despite losing a lot to the transferring out, here at number 7, Hawaii at number 6, Louisiana at number 5, Sam Houston State at number 4, Nebraska at number 3, Virginia Tech at number 2, and Iowa State at number 1. Surprised to see Iowa State there. Nick, in seasons past, how much has returning production correlated with actual wins on the field? Because I'm asking because, trying to see if Iowa State might be a dark horse next year. Rocco Beck, Abu Sama, Jaden Higgins on the outside. How much has returning production correlated with wins?
Well, it matters most on the extremes. And there are some teams that in the past, a team like Georgia, a team like Alabama, historically, maybe not this year, we'll see, they're able to overcome a really, really low number. But for the most part, if you're a team that's in the top 10 nationally, top 15 nationally, there is a very, very high chance, a high likelihood that you're going to improve records wise. I think it's something like 80% of teams that rank in the top 10, top 15 are going to improve their record overall, or at least improve things like team performance, which we rely on how well a team plays statistically on the field. That may or may not always include wins. But similarly, if you're in the bottom 10, 15, or 20 in returning production, unless you recruit at that just elite level like a Georgia, an Alabama, and Ohio State, chances are your record's going to go in an opposite direction. So a team like Iowa State that already showed improvement or overachieved a lot of expectations last year, there's a very good chance that they're going to be a highly competitive team. Might move from 7-6 to maybe 8-9 wins is really a reasonable goal for a team like Iowa State next year.
I should mention I just like Jalen Noel, still like him. Their freshman tight end, like him also. Iowa State might be my team next year. Of course, I picked Washington to be in the playoff in the offseason last year, largely in part due to your returning production data. I think that they were 4th in the country in returning production coming into 2023. You mentioned, some of these programs who can have a lower number, Nick, but still, produce on the field. Alabama, of course, is going through a huge transition this year. Nick Saban retires. Kalen DeBoer is in. Speaking of Washington, they're only 100th in the country. 100th in the country in returning production and 13th in the conference. Talk a little bit about, their lower number in the standings here.
Well, it's definitely something to watch because it's been, a long time since we've seen an Alabama team without Nick Saban at the helm. I have to expect that maybe they're no longer immune. Just if you compare these returning production numbers to some of the other work that we've got with our FBS team profiles. And of course, that's the next big thing on the to-do list, getting those 2024 numbers up and running. But if you were to compare, look at all the highlighting that we do for players who are moving out on, Alabama's projected depth charts, offense and defense, there's a lot more green. There's a lot more transfers out that we're used to, especially among players who played a significant amount of snaps last year. We're used to seeing that blue, that bright blue color, which is players who are moving on to the NFL, and there are more of those on the defensive side. But for Alabama specifically, that they rank 79th in offensive returning production adjusted, 118th on the defensive side. It really looks like on paper they're going to take a bit of a step back. And even though, again, looking at our team profile numbers, Alabama in almost every position group, ranks number 1, 2, or 3 in those raw average recruiting ratings at the end of last season. But if you just think about the raw numbers, the amount of players who played a significant number of snaps, number of plays, and were productive, guys like, Roydell Williams, who transferred out, running back, Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack, both transferred out, guys who left with eligibility remaining, like a Jermaine Burton or a Jace McClellan, who are moving on to the NFL. In years past, Alabama has done a great job being able to replace those types of players, with 4- and 5-star talent, and it's been mostly seamless. There's a bit of a hit to the depth, I think, for this Alabama roster, and it's going to be a significant concern to see if Kalen DeBoer can overcome it, or can use the spring transfer portal window to replace some of those players. And one of the great things about our returning production database, we make these updates daily. Some of the other folks out there, maybe they update them once a month or 4 times a year or whatever. If Alabama gets a significant incoming transfer, as soon as we hear that news, we'll be able to make the change in our returning production database, and we might see this number change. Alabama, come March or April, maybe they're not 100th anymore. Maybe they're 85th. Maybe they're 75th. They might creep up and up and up to where they're outside of that potential danger zone, and we're going to be able to see exactly how they're addressing what now looks like holes, guys that are moving on that they're going to need to replace.
I think one of the things in 2024 I'm paying attention to as a storyline is the love triangle between Alabama, Washington, and Arizona. Could we get to the playoff here in 2024, the 12-team playoff, where Arizona is in, Washington and Alabama out. I don't know. We'll see. New Big 12, Colorado, new Big 12. Of course, they rely heavily on the transfer portal. But when we look at that adjusted returning production ranking, they're 14th in the country. Not too bad in returning production.
Yeah, it's significant because last year, all the talk and our numbers, Colorado was like 131st or something in that adjusted returning production category. They were on that extreme end. And, even though they did take a small step forward record-wise, there really wasn't, a major jump. And that, of course, played out over the course of the year. This season, big deal is Shedeur Sanders coming back. The level of production that he was able to put up last year, because passing yardage is a fairly significant portion of our calculation. 23% of passing yards is what goes into that offensive returning production number. Another piece is the offensive line, and that was a major area of concern for Colorado. We talked a lot about it. The inability that unit showed to keep Shedeur Sanders healthy at the end of the year. Well, that was something that they really hit hard in the transfer portal. So even though they are losing some guys, it looks like, according to our numbers, 2 double-digit starters are moving on. Gerard Christian Licton, I forget his name, and Van Wells. But they are bringing in 5 players who started double-digit games elsewhere in the country last season. So because we are able to throw those numbers into the mix, and they're bringing in, all of those 5 players played at least 650 snaps last season, it's able to boost that offensive line experience number, basically. And those O-line snaps count for nearly half of that offensive returning production calculation. So that's a big boost to Colorado, even though, there are some players moving out, some experienced players. The fact that they brought in basically an entire unit, it was able to overcome that, or, overcompensate for what they lost. And receiving similarly, bringing in LeJohntay Wester, bringing in Will Shepherd, both of whom, looking at last year's Colorado numbers, would have ranked, among the top 4 in production for Colorado receivers last season, because that receiving yards number is 24%. I mean, we're just seeing that Colorado has really addressed the most impactful units and position groups, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that really do put them in a pretty good place and on the extreme other end now, top 15 of where they were last season as far as, experience coming back.
Will Shepherd, Shimon Madier, Cordell Russell, the athletic freshman wide receiver out of TCU, now at Colorado. I could be wrong. I could be mistaken, but I think that their opening line on the win total was 4.5. So, take that for what it's worth. They're number 14 in returning production in the country. Let's move here to Georgia. Georgia, of course, loses a lot of talent, as it always does, to the NFL draft. Amarius Mims, Ladd McConkey, one of my favorites. They lose their top 2 rushers in Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton. They lose Brock Bowers, but here they are, 22nd in the country in adjusted returning production and 3rd in the SEC. I think it's if you're projecting Georgia to get back to their national championship ways, this numbers seem to say that they have the chance to do so.
Absolutely. And in years past, I mean, when Georgia won back-to-back national championships, they were definitely on the lower end in returning production, ranked in the 80s, 90s, something along those lines. They were still able to overcome that, again, because they recruited at, a top 2 level, basically. And if you look position by position, they are, towards the very top of the national rankings in those raw recruiting ratings. So for Georgia to be coming off a 13-1 season, such a dominant performance at the end of last year, to rank in the top 25 and then the top 3 in the SEC in returning production, this is something we're not used to seeing. So not only was Georgia have that elite talent just across the board. They're able to replace a lot of the players that they will be, moving on from, like a Brock Bowers, with highly talented players. But some of the work that they've done in the transfer portal, the running back group, replacing Edwards and Milton with Trevor Etienne, huge, right? Replacing some of that wide receiver production, Ladd McConkey, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, with Colby Young and London Humphreys. They're just able to plug in experienced players in addition to just those raw, talented players that they've got that are kind of waiting their turn for a spot in that, rotation or starting lineup, what have you. This Georgia team, I mean, it's too early to say what they're going to look like in our team profiles and our overall power rankings come, spring when all those numbers are ready. But right now, I think Georgia's probably our most likely number one preseason team, because we're not used to seeing a team this talented also rank in the top 25 nationally in returning production.
Ben Yurosek is there too, or it looks like he's going to commit to Georgia. I mean, Carson.
Yeah, he's not even in our numbers because that's not official yet. So if he comes in, then that number might go up a couple of spots in addition.
Carson Beck is going to have all the catch radius and back shoulders to throw to in 2024 if they add Ben Yurosek to Colby Young to London Humphreys and the wide receivers that they have there that they return. Their good wide receiver core. And the tight ends from Lawson, Lucky, Pierce, Sperlin. Those guys are going to be just fine. Oscar Delp moving forward in 2024. Let's end here with Ohio State. The question is who is the best team in the Big Ten? Is it Michigan? Is it Ohio State? Is it Oregon? Here we have Ohio State, 68th in the country in returning production and 10th in the Big Ten. This is a team that's rebuilding, Nick.
Absolutely. But they've done far more than we're used to seeing as far as bringing in impact transfers. Ohio State is kind of in that top 3, 4, 5 as far as, every year, most talented roster in raw terms. They're going to be one of the best of the best. But this year, they are adding to that, supplementing that raw talent with players like Will Howard, who started, at a Power 5 program and won a lot of football games, played really well at Kansas State. Quinshad Judkins, bringing him in and bringing TreVeyon Henderson back. There's no better 1-2 running back combo in the country right now. Those guys basically, 2,000 yards between them, 26 touchdowns, something like that on the ground. So they're able to, bring in some high profile transfers on the defensive side as well. I mean, one big one, Caleb Downs, who I think is on the very short list maybe of best player in college football, regardless of position. They were able to add him to a defense that also brought back more than we expected. Guys like Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. So this Ohio State team, as usual, they're going to have to replace some starters. They're going to have to replace some linebackers, some guys in the secondary up front. They have to replace their starting quarterback, which usually is a major hit to returning production. And Kyle McCord, who of course transferred out. But being able to go to the transfer portal and bring in players who have already proven to be valuable on the field, in addition to those 4 and 5 star guys that they're able to roll in as they would in any normal year. We're able to move away from, in raw returning production numbers on the offensive side of the ball. Ohio State ranks 106th if we only looked at who's gone from 2023. But the fact that they were able to bring in some of those players that we talked about, they're able to move up, 24 spots right now as we speak to 82nd in adjusted offensive returning production, where, we might be talking about a major rebuild if they were in the triple digits. But the fact that they're able to go in and supplement with transfers, I really don't see much of a drop off. I think, quite honestly, I said Georgia's probably going to be our number one power rated team in the spring, I would expect. I think right now Ohio State is probably the most likely number 2 based on what they brought in addition to the talented roster that's already coming back.
You can get the full returning production database at campus2canton.com. Just become a C2C Winning Edge member. From Air Force to Wyoming, 134 FBS teams covered. Nick, we appreciate you for your time today, and we'll talk to you guys next time.